Hello. Good happy Sunday morning. It's 9 AM here in Australia. We're always ahead of the rest of the world, time-wise at least. So this live is going to be different from my usual epic jams on multiple pieces of equipment, or modular, or different rigs that I normally set up. I thought I'd just make it easy on myself and do a little intro, beginner to advanced session on this little piece of equipment, the Elektron Analog Four Mark II. In fact, it hasn't got the name on the front. So this is going to be pretty tutorial in many respects. Going to be taking you through the basics for those. It's particularly aimed at those people who are thinking of buying one of these or are new to the Elektron sequencing universe, that sort of thing, because obviously Elektron do a range of instruments. Hello Patrick, how are you doing? A range of instruments that have similar sequencing capabilities. I've got the Digitact and the model cycles, which is very similar in this sequencing area. But there's the Octatrack and the rhythm, and obviously Digitone and so on. But I've had an Analog Four since it really came out back in when was it? 2011-ish. That was the original Mark I version. So I'm a bit delayed, so I can't actually see if that's framed up properly. And it's more or less the same layout. In fact, you still see these. Well, I had this Mark I version. Sorry, sniffing. It's not COVID. Yeah, I had this Mark I version back in the day, and I've used it on lots of recordings, but the same layout as we'll see with tracks, sequencer and a little keyboard in the middle, and then all the parameters and so on. Oh, you got a hurricane, Patrick. Oh my god. Yeah, lots of extreme weather around the world at the moment, which is a bit crazy. Hope you're battened down properly. So I've always used this Analog Four as a bit of a go-to instrument when I'm sort of out and about. I often take it onto cliff edges. It's good for just sitting in the chair and coming up with ideas, and it's I see it as a workstation. I think some people see the Analog Four, they think, oh, it's a 4-voice synthesizer for creating pads. I don't see it that way. I see it very much as a 4 independent part monophonic synthesizer stroke drum and bass machine as well, because as you'll see later, any of the 4 tracks can be used to create multiple sounds on the same track, like drum machines on different steps and things. So I'm gonna this session is going to be a sort of overview of the layout of the machine, so that there's no confusion there. Hopefully you can see this screen as well. I tried to frame up the shot so that this was clear, because there's a lot of information on this. So what was I saying? Yeah, so it's going to be sort of an overview of the structure, some basic sound design, and then go into the sequencing, and then more advanced jamming using things like parameter locks and conditional locks and trigs and things on the sequencer. So, and really appreciate any questions. That will keep me on my toes, because this is a live. Obviously, when it goes into archive recording, happy for you to leave comments and ask questions as well. I've got about 13, 14 tutorials already up on YouTube, sort of going through using this as a music machine, not like a traditional review that you see from some of the bigger YouTube channels that just go into the technical side of it. So I've got lots in terms of using it as a musical instrument. So that's primarily the focus of today's session. So just the layout, the basic layout. Tracks and sounds. So I use these 4 buttons on the right here. Just going to have a cough. I use these 4 buttons on the right to, well, I see them as the track mutes on and off, and also where the sound is stored in my head per track. So every track, this is the initialized sound by the way, every track has a sound attached to it, and each of these tracks is a range of 64 steps, 4 pages times these notes. There's a mini keyboard included, so you can actually play using this. It's not velocity or aftertouch, but of course you can connect a MIDI keyboard in. I wanted to keep it simple for now, as if you've got this on a plane or you're playing it out in the park. So that's the keyboard. 7 or 8 octaves using these octave controls. This section here is where all the complexity is. You've heard of menu diving, but this is pretty high level. I can step between each of these buttons and then these knobs that control the parameters. You can see it's sort of 2 rows of 5. They correspond to the 2 rows of 5 on the screen here, which is pretty cool. Jeff, about the Mark 1. Yeah, the form factor is a big one for me in terms of upgrading. Excuse me. Much bigger layout, nicer buttons for the sequencing, the keyboard. I think there's a subtle difference in the sound. It does sound a bit richer and warmer, particularly in the bass end, which I did sort of comparisons because I did have the 2 of them side by side for a while. And because it's bigger and slightly slanted, you can't actually see it here, but it's thicker at the back here than it is at the front. It's slightly tilted up, so that form factor is a big one. And also this just felt a bit more open. The Mark 1, which I just showed you a picture of, was a lot more compact. I think it was only about that size. So it tended to be a bit tight, and I think the screen was even smaller. But yeah, there's a black version of this out as well, which is pretty cool for those into the black thing. But I like the let's just turn this on. I like the white one because it responds to different colours and things. So let's make it slightly green or blue because it's more reflective. And you can see the buttons easier. On a black one, the button's going to be more hidden. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, keyboard parameters. And the parameters are basically, controlling 4 LFOs here. I'm switching between 2 pages of LFOs, each with 2 on. There's envelopes. One of them's hardwired to the filter, and then there's an assignable envelope. So there's 2 envelopes there. Then there's the main envelope for volume. This one's more filter and other parameters. That one's the hardwired to the main volume. There's the filter section, 2 filters. Then this is a 2 oscillator machine, and even though it says Analog 4, each oscillator has got a sub oscillator as well. So as you'll see later, we can create quite interesting chordal effects, or actual chords, using the sub and the main oscillator, and then on the second using the sub and the main and detuning them to create chords. We've got a note page, which is things like how velocity sensitive it is, length of the note. Probability is my most important part of that one, which as we go into sequencing you'll see later how that works. And then an arpeggiator, which I don't use a lot, but it's useful sometimes. Over here we got sort of the global adjuster, global buttons for choosing things like kits, which I'll explain in a second, and sounds, mix setups, polyphonic configurations, metronomes, track pattern, and then here we have, no problem Jeff, and here we have choosing banks and patterns, but also this sub menus if you press the function key for things like tempo, jumps, accents, parameter slides. You tend to use those subs a lot. And then the main part of this, just go back to that. The main part of this is the sequencer, which is a step sequencer or a real-time sequencer. You can play it in live, or each of those steps you can also change any parameter over here per step, and that's where it gets interesting. And also a thing called sound locking, so you can actually have a different sound on every single step if you wanted, and that's where the Elektron sequencers get quite powerful. So I'll just sort of plow ahead because we're already, how long are we in? 10 minutes already. I'll probably put these up as chapters as long as I keep it pretty structured. So that was the basic layout. On the back there's various things, MIDI in, out, through, CV outs, which is one of my favourite things at the moment because I can connect this to the modular and have four tracks of CV going out, and they could all be CV, so that means 4 pitches if you like, and I normally gate in the modular setup itself. There's an external in, and you probably noticed this little guy down here, which I've actually got patched in stereo. I'm just using this as a little soloing device later. You've also got external outs. I think there's another difference between the Mark 1 is that you can have track 1, 2, 3, 4 all on external outs, and then there's the main out and headphones. Another key thing about this is the things like the sound browser and sound pool. The sound pool is slightly different. The pool is a project, or let's call it a pattern-based thing, so you can choose sounds very quickly on the fly. Whereas the sound browser is where everything's stored. And you can see I've pressed sound, we've got sound browser, and then we can go through hundreds and hundreds of sounds, presets, or your own, of course. In the sound manager, we've also got a place to delete sounds, tag them with various things. I tend to do all this because you can see the screen just gets stupid busy. I tend to do all this in a thing called Overdrive, which allows me to connect via a USB connection to the computer, and I can have a big screen to do all those things. And yeah, so let's let's go into the very basic. I've initialized the machine at the moment, so there's basically one oscillator playing a triangle wave, or sawtooth rather, on each track. To do the quick jam, let's just do like you're just switching on and you want to kind of just come up with some music pretty quickly. Double tap track 1, we then go into the preset menu, so you can, as you find a bit of a bass line, press yes, that's loaded into track 1, track 2, double click. This is just choosing the basic presets. This is how quickly you can sort of get a track going. So what should we have on that one? We'll have a bit of a sequencer line, and you can pitch them as well, of course. So bass on that one. I'll go through the effects in a minute because obviously some sounds come preloaded with the effects. And 3, I'll have a bit of a sort of a choppy sound, I think. So I'm just making this up as I go along. I think I'll have a... Oh, that one's pretty cool, just for chops. And then track 4, as I said earlier, you can use as a bit of a drum machine. So I'll set up 4 to the floor just to get going. The way to do that is I can press play. There's nothing on any of the tracks so far. Press the step mode. 1 and 5, I'm just going to choose a bass drum. And you can see what I did there. I pressed them down. I'll turn it up in a sec. And moved this sound browser button. So to get all 4 going, turn the track up. So there's your 4. Press track 1, enter in the bass line. Track 2, sequencer line. Track 3, choppy sound. And I've got the master volume here when I'm speaking. So that's just sort of getting an idea going. Obviously that's just 16 steps or 4 beats, which is we'll go through how to get 4 bars or even longer by chaining patterns together later. Each of those sounds I can mute, just to have the bass, press the function key and then just press the track key to mute them. Dead easy. So performance, that's pretty important. Just have the sequencer line and the chops. I generally, you can press mix and do things on the mixer, but I generally just press the sound and then, for example, pan the sequencer. I don't know if that's to your left or my left. That's my left at the moment. Put the chops on the right. And because these are quite close to each other, this, not sure what amp means actually, someone can tell me. I think it's amplitude, but it also contains the pan, it's like a VCA. We'll keep the bass in the middle. And on track 4, just as a demonstration, if I wanted, let's say hi-hats, I'll just press the steps. So that's a basic track, and then if you've got, you could have one of these tracks designated as a solo type track. I've got this connected at the moment just so I can set up 4 tracks and then pretend this is like a solo instrument attached. So it's going on external in, so I press the FX button and this one, external in, and I can turn the volume up for the external. Slightly different key. I think I'll choose C minor. Pentatonic minor, very good. Yeah, amp is amplifier or VCA. I think I mentioned VCA, I couldn't quite remember. So that, let's stop that. So that's just your basic, you know, setting up presets, and then you can do variations within that. Putting probability on certain notes. So for the bass line, I'll just demonstrate that before we go into sound design and things. Just as a quick demo. So there's the bass line. You can see where it's playing. Let's say, for example, on 9 or step 9 here, I wanted sort of varying notes that came in and out occasionally, just to give it some variation. Nothing worse than repeating things all the time. Oh, the first thing, by the way, is just to do it easily, so that's just not playing all the time. I can press the note button and then just change the probability. And you can hear straight away it's playing not random notes, but it's playing random gates or random triggers. If you put a bit of delay on that. And of course we can change the sound on the fly, make it a bit more staccato. I'm going to make it low pass and give it a bit of resonance to give it a bit more depth. So you can see as it's playing, you can change all the sounds, of course, which sorry, just had another cough break. These early morning sessions are not brilliant for me. I was a frog in the throat. Anyway, yeah, so you can change the sounds on the fly. This one still want a bit more staccato. But I really wanted to show you the probability side. So let's turn the probability so every note's going to play. Just adjusting the envelope and the filter. Let's say, for example, I wanted every now and then for step 9 to be a different note. Choose a note. I'm keeping my finger on the step and then choosing a different note. So that A flat there. And you can hear it's playing all the time. So I'm now going to do a parameter lock. Hello, chilling with 10mm. Great name. So you can see it's playing every time at the moment. I've still got my finger on it, but I can go into note and probability and say, can you play half the time? See, it missed that one. Played that one. Played that one. Missed that one. And that's kind of cool. You can go pretty crazy with this. You could press 3 steps at once. And I'm going to use that C. And then put like 20% on those. And very quickly you can build up a bass line that's constantly varying because you're adding in steps and then changing the probability that they're going to play. Another note here. Volume mixing wise, I tend to do it this way, so let's get rid of everything. So I generally hit the track and then adjust the track level over here. And you can of course mute this function, press the track and it will mute that track. Press the track, turn the level up. This is muted because it's yellow. Function plus that switches it on. So that's using presets. So what time are we at? 24. So the idea with that is sort of 10-minute intro. That's a sort of quick way in, just using existing sounds. It could be your own sounds, just to get a jam going in a couple of minutes. So that's kind of cool. But we're going to start from scratch. Each of these tracks has now got different sounds on. Track 4 still initialized because it was the drum track. Using sound locks as opposed to the track sound itself. But you can press kit, and I'm going to load a kit, and a kit sounds like drums, but it's actually a way to get sounds into each of the tracks very quickly. So what I did there was just load my initialized sawtooth kit in, which is what I do often if I just want to do sound design, then sequencing, and for different genres, because, you know, obviously presets tend to sometimes dictate. Got a bit of echo from somewhere. Oh, I think it's coming from the computer. Let me turn that down. So what was I saying? Yeah, the presets sometimes dictate the genre, but sometimes you just want to start from scratch. So we're going to do a bit of sound design now, just to show how quick it can be. I've done a lot of this in the live videos, which you can check out on my channel. So that is basically oscillator 1. You see the level there. Playing this sawtooth. Just not that clicking noise. It's me going. That oscillator, pretty boring by itself. You can do various things to it. And then there's a second oscillator, which is currently muted, but I can turn the level up. If I detune them slightly, oscillator 1 and 2, you immediately get quite a fat sound. And you can see this is a pretty flat envelope at the moment, just fast attack, full sustain, no release. The next thing you would do quickly is filter that. I often use low pass for a lot of sounds, so that's basically your cutoff frequency. I press filter, takes me into the filter submenu, bit of resonance, and then using the second filter. And then we got the depth of the envelope, which is over here, but I can add that in. So that's how much the envelope affects the filter. Then we've got the amplifier. Thanks, Jeff. Speaking of Jeff, he just asked if it's probability on the bass line. I use probability on literally everything in different ways. So the probability is great on the drums if I just want the hi-hat to play on a certain step occasionally. I use it on sequencer lines because nothing worse than a sequencer line just going over and over again. So I might choose a couple of steps and say only play some of the time. The bass line tend to do what I did then, which is add a couple of notes so that it increases the complexity of the bass line every now and then. Yeah, it can become messy if you use it too much. I know on the model cycles there's one button called chance, which effectively does it per track, so you can just say the chance of everything playing on that sequence. You can turn it down to 0 or somewhere in the middle, but that's for the whole sequence. I'm not trying to remember actually on model cycles if you can do it per step. Having control over per step probability is a lot more musical, and it feels like you're in control a lot more, so if that makes sense. So yeah, back to the sound design. What was I doing? So I generally go through this: oscillators, those two, then filter it, then shape the waveform, a bit more release. I can increase the release to infinite. I don't know if you saw that. That way we can get these notes that just play indefinitely. And do that on the filter as well. That's great for ambient type music, which I'll do kind of now, just talk about sound design from that perspective. Then we've got the envelopes. There's the amplifier envelope, which is the volume, and then there's two other envelopes. The first one here is designated, in fact I'm going to turn that infinite off so you can hear things. The first one here is designated or hardwired to the filter. So if I turn the filter down, so we've got a separate filter shaped envelope, and then there's a second envelope on this page, so there's three envelopes altogether, which you can designate to certain things, and this is where it gets kind of cool and advanced, because you can choose when In fact, on both of the envelopes, you can also send it to two of destinations parameters. So you could have the envelope affecting the pitch. In fact, if I just scroll through, we got pitch, depth of the filter, frequency modulation, literally everything, even the pan. I've never tried the pan. Let's just see if what that envelope affecting the pan sounds like. So that's that one, and then you turn the depth up. So there's a destination for the parameter, and then there's a depth. So you can see I'm adjusting the attack of that pan, and you can hear it based on that slope effect in the pan. Might be something you use for ambient type things if you want things to move around in a much more controlled way. You can also use, what I tend to use, is the LFOs for things like that. I don't know if you noticed there, I often see people using Elektron Gear and they're doing these minute adjustments all the time with their fingers. If you just want to get to like 0, you press function and then turn the knob and it immediately jumps you to 0 or the extreme setting, so that's kind of cool. Then as I said, my favourite thing is the LFO. I'm going to turn the infinite sustain up again, release rather. So the LFO, 4 LFOs, so this is, whoa, it's a bit loud. 4 LFOs, a pretty amazing amount of modulation you can get going on this per sound. Page 1, and then press it again for page 2. Page 1 has already got some destination set like the cutoff frequency, so that's pretty straightforward. Just going to check the frequency. I think I had the envelope depth a bit high, so the LFO wasn't affecting it as much. And now you can hear it. So the LFO's got a whole bunch of things here. I could spend a whole session just doing the LFO modulation side of this instrument, which is pretty deep. So you've got the speed there, and then the multiplier of the speed, so increasing the speed right up to audio levels, but I tend to leave it at 2, 3. Then we got the fader, how it fades in or not. Various types of triggers. So this free modulation, it just goes by itself. It's re-triggered and so on and so on. You know all this stuff. So that's just the filter going there. Let's turn the sound up. And then for panning, I mentioned panning. There's already a preset one on page 2 of the LFO. So pretty slow speed. Set it to a sine wave and then increase the depth. And now you can hear that sound panning around. Each sound comes alive with a mix of effects. So this is back to the amplifier, which on the top of it's got the envelope. On the bottom it's got effectively effect sends, so a bit of delay on that sound. Great for ambient things. Reverb. And then even a bit of chorus. So if you don't like the depth of the filter there's a bit much, I can just turn the depth down, so it's just a subtle filtering on the LFO. And that's kind of a nice little background droney thing. One thing from a performance perspective, I'll give you an idea how that works. If I go to track 2 now and quickly sound design like a sequencer sound, you can hear that's pretty boring. So let's quickly choose like pulse width, pulse, make it really staccato, bit of release, bit of delay, Another thing I didn't explain was the tracks per pattern. So if I press A, we're on pattern 4 at the moment, bank A4. I've actually deleted all the preset, all of the preset sort of jams on here that you get with the machine. So bank A, pattern 4. That pattern keeps the track things, even though you load a new kit in. So it's kind of good. You can set up a sequence and then bring in a different kit to see how it sounds with different sounds, but keep the sequence. But if you're starting from scratch, obviously you don't really want all these on here, so you can clear things pretty quickly just by choosing the track and the clear button. So function clear will clear the track on each of them. I've now got rid of everything, so when I press play across the 4 tracks, I won't hear anything. So that's the drone sound. And then track 2, I was just building up a quick sequencer sound. If you haven't put a drum beat down, you can sort of enter things in step mode. There's different ways of entering notes. So for example, I could put 1 and 9. Turn the track on. That will give you a bit of a metronome for you to do a live jam. To do a live jam, you press the record, and while your finger's still on it, press the play button. The reason I just set that up quickly was to show you how in performance mode you can switch between the tracks here and play them while affecting the other tracks. I'll explain what that means. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change that drone note. So I'm playing, distorting again, I'm playing that in real time. If I keep my finger on a note, I can then switch to the other track, and it's still remembering I've got that note on, and do some adjustments to like that track. I could adjust the filter, switch back to track 1, change the note, switch to track 2, carry on doing some adjustments. So let's get the like auto panning going, for example. LFO, pan, depth. Switch back to track 1, change the note. Actually forgot I switched now. And because it's infinite sustain, I can then go to this. Another little performance trick, let's turn the bass down a bit. Another little performance trick is obviously when you play the keyboard, it interrupts the sequence. Turn the sustain up a bit. And it's kind of cool for doing breakdown sections. You just want to, without turning the sound down altogether, as soon as you release the key, it will immediately bring the sequence back in. And you can do sound design on the fly. So let's say, for example, I wanted a 5th chord happening on track 3, even while that's playing. And this is more of a live performance, doing things on the fly. I can change the notes. I could actually enter those in. I mean, like I'll just, for example, on track 1, that droney sound, just press a C and then have it go into a G on that. And then on the fly, I can sound design the voice for track 3 and the way Sorry, what I'm going to do here is do a fifth chord, because one of the hello Laurel, one of the issues with Analog 4 for most people, they think it's some kind of pad machine. With the two oscillators you can do some detuning, so this, for example, turn oscillator 2 up and tune it up a seventh. It now becomes a fifth chord. You can do, I'll show you later, major sevenths and minor sevenths using 4 subs. And this one again, I'm going to do infinite sustain, get the filtering a bit softer, get some panning going. Perhaps I'll have more of a Rhodesy pan, quite a fast pan on the LFO. So this you can see I'm interrupting the drone sequence here. The drone sequence is still playing those C and a G, but I can go in and give it some complexity, just pop in every now and then from a performance perspective to go and change it. So this chord, because it's a fifth, you've got to think musically. If you're being musical, if you're not being musical, you can go crazy. But making sure that the fifth, because I'm hitting the root here, is actually in the key. So I couldn't hit, for example, a D note, because that would play in a natural, which would not fit with this C minor thing I'm playing at the moment. But virtually every other note of the scale is fair game. And you can mix on the fly. Not sure what happened there. I think we had a Wi-Fi break. I'll just keep playing and wait until you guys have said everything's back. Is anyone out there? Just say in the chat if it's reconnected, if you're receiving. Just broke them. I think OBS and... Oh, Jeff, hello. Thanks for that. So where was I? Yeah, just on that basic sort of workflow thing, getting a track going. Another thing you can do, of course, is not even use the sequencer at all. Just leave play off, and if you've got things like infinite sustain on some of these, you can get very cool ambient things happening. It's a bit of ambient modulation. A bit of vibrato on that sound, I think. So I've pressed the oscillator key twice. I go into a bit of a vibrato subpage and a few other things. in which sounds. So you can do a live performance without the sequencer just by having these infinite sustains and pads going. Pretty cool. From a if you're doing rhythmic things though, let's just turn off any sequences I've got going. I'll just do it the quick way. Just to go over that, say I always use track 4 for like a rhythmic thing, because I know some people are quite surprised when this becomes a drum machine. Once you go into step mode, let's turn the track up. So once you've got a sequence running, you press a key, it will automatically play the track sound, which as you can hear at the moment is just that default one. So what you can do with that is turn that oscillator down. So obviously if you're turning this into a bit of a drum rhythm track, in fact I'm going to make this one track just to demonstrate how this works. A drum, bass and a bit of a choppy sound all on the same track. So let's just go 4 to the floor, press that, choose using, probably blocking the thing there, choose from the sound pool, in this case the tight kick, which is not playing. I think, oh, I accidentally changed the parameter for that. I actually turned down something which I don't want to do. Just clear the track again, easier. So let's just quickly add 2 kicks and then 4 to the floor type thing. And then each of those, so for example, let's say for example, just on that last one, I wanted that to have a delay. I can actually press the key, go into my amplifier menu and add some delay. Just a little bit on that last step. So you can do, and that's called parameter locking, and locked a delay to that parameter. I could also say, for example, lock a reverb to that step. Bit too much. Hope that makes sense. Let's put a mix of a shaker and a hi-hat. So I'm going to have on step 3 a hi-hat. So that's a bit loud, so I can change the volume. And this is all parameter locking, keeping my finger on here and adjusting all these. Put a bit of delay on that. So I'm just sound designing this one step at the moment. I can even put like an LFO pan, so each step it will be a different place in the stereo field each time it plays. Once I've got that sounding how I want it, I can just copy that, keep my finger on it, press copy. I've copied the trig, and then I just choose another trig, like I'm going to have it on step 11. I'm now going to paste that hi-hat, so it's now over here as well. Makes sense. And then on 7 I'm going to have a different sound again, just to have some complex bit of a shaker. So that's a bit long, so I'm going to tighten that up a bit. Adding a bit of delay. I'm just going to pan that hard left or your right, depending on how you got your speakers set up. There. And then copy it, and then paste that, I think on step 15 I'll put it on. If I wanted to change the sound, this is where it gets a bit complicated, because you've got, like the bass drum for example is on 4 steps. You can change it on the fly, trying to not block the camera, like press the steps again and then choose a different different sound. But the disadvantages of that, it loses the parameter lock. So like, for example, that, oh no, sorry, correction, you can do it so it does that, but it's still got the delay on that last step, whereas that one, there's no parameter locks on it. Bit of reverb on that one. Right, this is still on one track here, so this is the nice thing about the Analog 4 is that we can, for example, add in, fill up all the steps. So let's say, for example, on step 6 I wanted a bit of a choppy sound. And again, let's have that panning, different points in the stereo field every time it's triggered. It's kind of slow, let's speed it up. The panning, that is. And they work great with a bit of delay. A bit of delay will make it last longer. If I wanted to introduce a bass, some kind of bass into this, I've got all those empty steps to put some kind of bass sound on. One way to do this is, I think, well, those are, you can just choose a preset bass, or I could sound design one quickly, which in fact I'll do. You can see as I press the key it will kill the sequence, so it takes a bit of practice. So I'll turn the, so this is like a quick bass sound design, bit of sub, filtering, that's still playing, by the way. I'm just, as soon as I keep that pressed, I'm just after sort of a nice bassy sound. Staccato. It's got to be staccato because it's the thing about this sequence, of course, is that when like step 9 plays, as soon as step 10 plays, it cancels 9, which is one reason for putting reverb and delay to give the sense that each step evolves. So let's just put a bass on step 2. You can hear it there. We've got control over the volume of that step. And I can carry on sound designing that. Bit too much resonance on there, I think. And as soon as we get the delay going on it, the ping pong delay, and all these empty steps I can play different notes. And even though they're all locked in now, got one empty step, I can then carry on sound designing that single sound on that track. So that's not step-by-step dependent, that's track dependent, which is good because you can have like a master sound and then the drums are filling in the gaps, if that makes sense. And there's a bit of, as you're sound designing, you're balancing it with the rest of the track. And of course then we've got different sounds on here, so you've got 3 more tracks to play with. So that's just one track. Just mute that. Oh, sorry, for these sounds with infinite sustain, the only way to stop them is to stop the whole piece, or you have to sort of you have to go in and take the infinite sustain off temporarily. That makes sense. So track 3, I think we had a 5th chord thing going on infinite sustain. So this is, even though these are just 5th chords, it's going to make it a bit softer. I'm going to make the filter a bit faster so it's more chorusy. So this is a great idea of how you can then get chord progression going on one track. In fact, I'll turn those 2 off. So we've only got 2 tracks going at the moment, the drum bass choppy sound, and I could put probability on those, so you can hear it's a bit loopy at the moment. That could be a sample loop. I'm going to actually put some probability, so I think step 6 is that chop, so I'm going to have it so it only plays every now and then. Go into note, pressing the right one, yeah. So I set it to about 33%, so it only occasionally plays. I could do that with a whole bunch of them actually, just randomly choosing steps, and this is just to make it more interesting. Avoiding obviously the bass drum if I can. That first bass sound is a bit annoying. Okay, so we've got that chord here. I'll turn it down. So I've just made that track 4 a bit more interesting by adding some probability across the sequence. I've kept the 4 to the floor going. Let's add another sound in here just for some variation. So that one's a bit loud, so a hard pan to the right, and then probability again. So hopefully that's making sense. Let's go back to these chords. I'm now going to just show you, using just 2 tracks and an external instrument, how you can create you know, a bit of a solo. I've still got 2 tracks to play with. Probably better, so we've got something a bit heavier on the lead there. So this external input, I press FX and then external in. I've got control over the delay for the external, so I can actually put the Analog 4 delay, which is in time with everything else, on that external input, which is kind of cool. It just brings it in with the sound. I just changed that chord sound to a square LFO on the filter, just to give it that cross, slightly polyrhythmic effect. I think I could change it to being more polymeter. So it's now should be in sync with the track on that, and if I change the multiplier of that, suddenly it becomes an interesting thing. I can then filter, let's go into the second LFO and have a slower filter, which is going to filter the volume, not filter the volume, sorry, modulate the volume to create that interesting variation. I'll have that set polyrhythmically. I'm using this speed adjuster here to get those polyrhythmic or polymeter effects on the LFOs. And now I can obviously control the sounds, the chordal aspects. Turn the rhythm track up a bit. Jeff, let's turn that track down. Yeah, sorry, this lead sound's just coming from the chaos. It's not MIDI, it's purely coming from an audio output into the external ins on the Analog Four. It's got a couple of really nice sounds which I use a lot on my tracks. I could, it's a good lead off point actually, there's no reason to stop me. So that's a bit heavy, that modulation. Might just go back to something a bit more gentler for that pad. Because I've got two tracks free, there's no need to have this at all. I could actually just choose a lead preset, or I could have sound design one quickly, but I'll just speed things up a bit because we're up to an hour. Blimey. A favourite sound on here is this lead free or lead free. So track 2, that could be a lead sound. I don't need this at all. Bring the rhythm track up. Press track 2. And this is where this performance thing comes in, which I'm seeing people use a lot. Switch, keep your finger on that note, switch to track 3, which is playing the chords, change the chord. See, that's on the D, so let's choose a G minor. Bit higher register. Choose an A minor 7. Not A minor. Sorry, A flat major, what am I talking about? Loud. You can play this keyboard quite fast. It's got good response. I think the original Mark 1 had little circular ones which didn't feel very keyboardy. Let's make that pad a bit richer. I'm going to bring the drone back in as well, just to double up that. Okay. Oh yeah, the other thing on the lead, if I said I don't use the arpeggiator a lot, so if I press 2 notes, obviously it's monophonic because I've set it to that. There is a polyconfig mode if I press function and then this submenu here on mix. It allows me to have a thing called voice stealing, so you can have, see how that's not playing the 2 notes. If I set at least 2 of these checked, it will mean this will steal from other voices. So voices 1 and 2, we're currently on track 1 and 2. If I say yes to 1 and 2 now, it's using the engine to steal a voice from track 2, allowing me to play duophonically here. If I checked 3 and 4, I could play 4 notes on one part. But it's stolen all the other voices, and the effect that has, let's just start this, I'll turn off 2 and 3, I just want to hear track 4 going, the rhythm thing. So now when I play a, what was I on? It was on track 2. So you can see track 4 still playing what sounds like a lot of stuff. It's got the drums, a little bass thing going on, and a couple of those choppy sounds. But because the engine's constantly reallocating the polyphony, I can actually play 4 voice chords, and then because it's playing that one underneath, it's reusing the engine to play each of those steps, if that makes sense. So it doesn't mean you can't play pads and other things. I think when it will start to steal is if I, for example, bring the drone back on. You hear that low bass, I'll turn it up, and then try and play a chord. Here, as soon as I press the 3rd one, it cut the drone out because it's borrowing from that track. So that's the polyphony issues with this. I tend to leave it mostly in monophonic per track, so there's no voice stealing. But there, as you can see, there's you're just stuck to monophonic. It's not a bad thing because you can do some clever fast runs. That's another thing. Let's get rid of track 4. Chordal things. So let's go back to track 3 where I had just that 2 note. So this is polyphony using the built-in oscillators. So oscillator 1 is playing the root, so a C in that case. Oscillator 2 is playing, showing on the tuning, +7. A fifth above that. When it gets interesting is, I'll turn oscillator 2 off. So we've just got oscillator 1. I'll get rid of that filtering effect just for now. Bit better. So that's just oscillator 1. It's got a thing called a sub oscillator, which is like a free one. It doesn't have any of the effects, it's just a part of the engine. But it's got this great one called a fifth sub. So it's a fifth below, what's that, 7 semitones. If you then tune the whole oscillator up with the sub to +7, that's a fifth up, you've then got the root and the fifth all on that one oscillator. If that makes sense. So I'm not using the second oscillator at all, it's just purely the sub and the root. Which is great because it's got the same effect as using 2 oscillators. If I then bring in the second oscillator and oops, what am I doing? Turning it up. In fact, it was there, but just because it was on the root. So there's the second oscillator. If I do the same thing, bring in the sub on the fifth, we've now got a fifth below, which is like an F, then a C, then a G. If I tune the whole of the second oscillator up to, let's say, a 10 semitones, we've now got a C, well in this case a C minor chord, G minor 7, F minor 7, C minor 7, because I tuned it up a tenth, it's now turn oscillator 2 down. Oscillator 1 is playing C and a G. Oscillator 2, turn it up, is playing a E flat and a B flat because I tuned it up a tenth, and it's then playing the sub, which is a fifth, 7 semitones below. If you're in like this case C minor, you can choose chords which have minor sevenths, which work with the music. Don't like the attack on that. What's quite going on there? Oh, it's because I've got the envelope depth. So it's a bit softer. Where it falls down from a musical perspective is, if I press E flat, we're then going to get an E flat minor 7, which doesn't work with the rest of the music. I mean, some people are fine with that. In fact, let's turn the rhythm track on and do some playing just of those chords. So remember, I'm only on track 3 here, and then track 4 is this rhythm track. Hello, Philip. Bring in that panning again, a bit of filtering. Don't quite like that sound, I'm just going to choose triangle waves. Bit of vibrato. Sounding a bit Bon Tempi organ now though, so apologies for that. Put a bit of chorus on the whole thing, on this just the pad sound. What was I saying? Yeah, so from musically, I can now do 4-note polyphony just on that one track. And we've only got 4 beats going at the moment, so I'm just going to sequence in C minor and then the G. So that's a bit fast for chords, and this is where we get into more on the sequencer side now, so I'll turn the rhythm track off, which you saw me create earlier. So the nice thing about the sequencer on this is it's got all sorts of parameters. If I press function and then page, it brings up this control over what each track is set to stepwise. On the normal mode, the whole pattern's 16 steps and at 1 times speed. So if I go into advanced mode, we've now got control over every aspect of every track. So track 3 is now set to 16 steps. I can choose it here as well, so it's now, you can hear it speeding up. It's only doing 7 steps of 16. Let's choose 16. And at 1 times, the thing I was interested in here is this 1 times. The other thing is the length, the master length. So when you start to do polymeter, so that's where track 1 may be 7/8, track 2 may be 64 steps or 4 bars of 4, track 3 may be, in this case, a slow 4 beats and so on. You want the master length to be infinite so that they overlap. So I'm going to set it to inf. what that means is that when a track loops, say on 14 steps, playing a 7/8 thing, it will do it within itself and not be reset every time the master gets to 0. So there's a bit of thinking that goes on there. The key thing with this chord track though is I'm going to slow the whole track down to half speed. That makes sense. In fact, the whole thing to quarter speed. That for things like one chord on each step. It's kind of cool for that. In fact, I could probably make it quarter speed and 8 steps, and then put a different chord on every step, and then have the probability kick in so that it chooses a different chord, and it makes an endlessly changing chordal pattern. So I might actually do that. I'll go to 8 steps. It's just going to play that first one now on quarter speed. I think I can go down to 8 speed as well, but let's just try quarter speed. Go back to normal sequencer mode. So there's the C. Let's have an F-7 on there. Let's have a G-7 on there. G-7, and so on. So one thing I can do straight away is just make the probability of them playing pretty low. Say 25%. So notice it only played the C minor there. See if it's going to play F minor or G minor. No, it still likes that C minor. Come on. Oh, there we go. So we've suddenly got an F minor and G minor. To keep this musical, I'm going to add in a couple of other chords. So, in fact, one thing I can do, because it's playing randomly, I could actually sequence this. No, I have to sequence it musically because it's doing it in a linear fashion. So on the 3rd step, I'm going to put an E flat, which will be an E flat major, sorry, E flat minor 7, which is not very musical. So I'm going to change that, oscillate to 2. I'm going to tune it up one more semitone, those second pair of notes. So it's now going to play a major 7. And the same with the A flat. So I'm parameter locking the tuning, basically, for this. Grey Analog Four, yeah. Is this the grey one, or do you mean the Mark 1? I talked about the Mark 1 earlier on. So that chordal sequence now, it's not the best sound, and it'll probably need to, let's see if we can choose get a bit more of a sawtoothy, stringy thing going. The probability again, I think 3 and 7 need some probability on them. So we're only going to play every now and then. And then bring in the rhythm track. Turn that track down a bit. So it's all sounding a bit jazzy. Mainly because we've got a lot of minor 7s going on. And then a solo. So the having the probability on these chords is not the most musical. I could, for example, make sure that I always have a C minor 7 by setting that to 100% on the first of every loop. So it always returns to the C minor 7 now, just to root it in a bit more now on. Just to sort of start to finish up a bit more on the polymeter side. So say track 1, at the moment I think it's that droney sound. I'm going to change that quick sound design to a sequencer type sound. Obviously take the infinite sustain off, make it a bit higher, faster attack on everything. And then I'm going to set this length to 14 steps, or 7/8 in normal money. 14 steps for that sequence. Press function and page. Now this is a 7-step sequence, so I can enter it in manually, or I can just, like for example, put in some guide steps and then play over the top of that, because I've got something to work to. So that's 7/8, bit of delay, very Tangerine Dream again. See what it sounds like with the chords over it, just out of interest. Bring the rhythm track in. Oh, one thing, I'll stop it just for a second. One thing, when you change the sequence parameters from normal to advanced, and then you start fiddling around with the tracks, they all tend to go a bit out of sequence as you change things. So from a performance perspective, if you do some of that, you've got to think of having a break. Like for example, imagine you're playing a solo. So imagine it's playing, you've done a load of sequence adjustments. Is to sort of stop it, have a little bit of a breakdown, and then restart it again. Need to check the 14/6, checking the sequence line here. Oh, that's what's going wrong. By accident, I've changed the main rhythm track to 15/16, which is why it sounds crazy. So let's change it back to 4/4. There we go. Make the delay of the sequence decay rather a bit sharper, so it's not interfering with the rhythm track. Put some global effects on the rhythm track. Just want to check the oscillators on this one. I'm adding an octave oscillator and a sub just to make that sequencer a bit richer, changing them to pulse square waves. Suddenly we're into sequence territory. What's it doing there? Bring the chords back in. So the chords are not really working for me, so I'm just going to kill a couple of them, change the sequence length from 8 steps to 16, and then add, and I think, yeah, we got a different chord on the halfway through. And again, that chord was, because I changed it again, it was slightly out of sequence, so now it's playing in time. Again, bit of a solo. Get the arpeggiator going. So the arpeggiator can make you sound like a pretty cool player. See, I've got these 3 notes on here. Yeah, Bill, just spotted your question. Just having a drink. Slurpy sounds. Yeah, the Elektron workflow takes time. I mean, I had an Analog Four back in 2011-12, I think, when it first came out, and I remember the first year or so, it was like, oh, this is kind of pretty hardcore, just knowing where things are intuitively. Nowadays, if I want to change something, I'll just click, bang, and I'm straight into changing it. I don't have to think of the logical steps, so it's much more intuitive now. So, for example, just turn, if I just wanted to, if I go, that needs less vibrato, I just kind of click, turn, and it's done. And it takes a while to pick it up. I had to go at an octatrack for a while, and that seemed even harder. It just, things are sort of hidden in the wrong places. At least with this, you've got this basic oscillator filter amp envelope LFO thing going on here, so that's more very traditional layout for sound design. The sequencer, yeah, it's just a basic 64-step sequencer, so if you're kind of familiar with that. The complexity with sound locks and parameter locks on each step, you kind of get used to that. Once you know what these do, you can just do that per step rather than per track. So it takes a little getting used to for sure. Mute all those. On that chordal one, I think I'm going to have an A flat major 7 occasionally play on that step. So there's A flat major, parameter lock, just tune it up to, oops, tune oscillator 2 up to 11, G minor 7, A major 7, and we'll put an E flat major 7 on there, parameter lock that up again. So we've got 4 chords playing there. Bring the rhythm in, and the sequence. Bit of a solo. Yep, you've sold your Analog Four Mark II and Digitact. Yeah, Digitact is different beast again. That can be a really simple, because I've got one of those as well. That can be a really simple sampler drum machine if you want it to be. I also use it as an 8-track synthesizer because it's got 16 tracks effectively, and the top 8 you can actually use as a synthesizer because you can use raw waveforms in there and loop them and things, which I've done on one of mine. I think it's called the Ambient Digitact, just using it as a synth. But you can just load in drum samples and loops and use it as a loop player. Or what I do in my main setup is use the bottom MIDI 8 tracks of the Digitact as the main hub. So I've got all my other gear like Hydra synths and Stretch string machines and things all on the bottom 8 MIDI tracks of the Digitact. So it can be a hub device as well. But yeah, if you haven't got the hang of it and you like something, I don't know, a lot of people just like grid systems like the circuit or the MPC type stuff, just lots like, you know, Ableton live grid things because it's more logical. This requires you to, you know, think a bit more. You know, some of the steps are hidden, so you can't actually find them very easy. So I think I've covered coming up to 1:30. I think I've covered most things. If there's any other questions, we've got one question there. The arpeggiator can take out from its MIDI out trigger of the synths. Yeah, so a new feature that came in, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, is that these can be all external, so you don't need to use the internal sounds at all. Any track can send MIDI out. I think on the track menu, press track, and then down the bottom you've got a send MIDI checkbox, so you can actually send all of that out, so out of MIDI, and then you can assign the channel. So track 1 was a MIDI thing, but track 1 send, if I press yes, that will then send track 1 out the MIDI. So you can either use the sounds here, just sequence external gear, or have the two together, which is pretty cool. And yeah, when you're in arpeggiator mode like that, it will then send that out on that track. The MIDI configuration is press this global project button here, then choose MIDI config. You've then got a control over each of the tracks and which channels they go to. And the CV one, if you go back to a few weeks ago, I did a live where this was sending 4 tracks of CVs out to my modular gear. So potentially you could have 4 tracks of CV coming from FX and CV, that's where they kind of live, and then 4 tracks of MIDI all coming out simultaneously. So you've then got a 6-track machine, if that makes sense, which is pretty cool. I've never used it that way. I've generally only used CV and then the internal sounds. I've never used the external MIDI and the modular stuff together. So pretty cool. What else have I probably not covered? Probably best at this point just for you to ask any other questions when this goes into archive. I haven't really covered genres of music. I think I sort of said, you know, how this can be used for sort of ambient things using infinite sustains and so on. Obviously, it can be used for more beaty music by using a track as a sound lock and then quickly creating lots of different, I'm doing this completely at random now, lots of wacky things on that. Getting rid of that horrible loud noise, I'm not sure what it was. So that sort of step thing, you can use it as a drum machine, and you can use all 4 tracks as droney modular things. Bill Smith, I came in a bit late. What are you using for the mini Quay oscillator for? Oh, so this, I was just showing you the external input. So I kind of use this for solos occasionally. This is going into press FX, and that is going into the stereo. So this has got a stereo output. I sometimes use it for creating, using it as a bit of a backbeat. So if I'm pretty lazy and I just want to say solo, I can use this as a quick drum machine. Obviously it's not in sync. It's annoying that this doesn't have any sync capability. But if you get it roughly in the same tempo, so the tempo of this is 120, I think this is 120, you can use it as that. And it's amazing how long it stays in sync for, actually, when you get them both going. But I generally use this as you just saw, sorry, use English, for soloing things. So which Okay, so you've got that bill. Hello Gary, just got my A4. I'm using it to synth great analog sounds and then make some processing in other programs. How do you think this is sequencer for experimental Avant Garde? Yeah, it's I generally don't go down that road, but you can go absolutely potty with the modulation aspects of this. Just using that top sound, for example. Start to modulate things like the pitch. You're suddenly, you know, just choosing pitch mod there and changing the speed. Then modulating the speed, you can go pretty crazy with sounds. Changing it's all down to this destination, you know, choosing wacky destinations. So that was sub-oscillator. Yeah, I'm not, you can go as avant-garde as you want because the modulation is just very, very deep, and you got 4 tracks. So it's a bit like having, if you're from the modular world and you like to go avant-garde, it's like having 4 separate sound source modules, but having this crazy mix of 4 LFOs. Imagine having 4 LFOs per voice, 3 envelopes per voice, and then 2 filters per voice. And then the waveform choice is kind of limited from an analog perspective, but you've also got inputs, so you can actually bring audio into these oscillators as well. So you can plug your guitar in, for example, and then do all this modulation stuff on top. So you can go pretty crazy from an avant-garde perspective if you want to. Most people just use it as a bit of a beatbox and then trying some melodic ideas out, and I tend to do that as well, just because it's perhaps more accessible. I like, if I want to listen to something, it requires a bit of effort to listen to a lot of avant-garde stuff. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to think. There's lots of other things I didn't cover in terms of performance mode. So there's a performance mode and it allows you to assign macros to each of these buttons. So for example, I could have A which turns up the filter and the LFO and adds the sub bass in, things like that. So you can be, I don't tend to do that because it's it requires a lot of setup effort. I like to do things more on the fly and just choose things quickly and then change them one at a time, I suppose. Whereas that's good for if you're gigging and you just load in a pattern or 2. If I want to chain patterns, by the way, I can just choose 4 and then 3. That's then going to play 4 and then 3 in a chain, and the chain light pops up. For those who asking questions about more songwriting things, turn chain off. And performance mode is similar to that in that you can quickly choose a pattern, change what the performance is. If you want to go into a different piece altogether, pattern, and all the performance things change. In fact, I don't use it that often, so I'm not even sure if the performance is per pattern. Yeah, overbridge bill. Yeah, I said at the beginning, and you obviously don't really miss that. I use overbridge really to manage sounds only. So I don't do a lot of DAW stuff anymore. I've got the full Logic package and everything, and completely aware that all of this can feed into different tracks on the DAW, and I can go in and mix it properly and add different effects and things. But I tend to just use overbridge for sound management and backup and things like that. They've just introduced, I think, the latest version, a way to back up everything you've done. But that is another thing. I don't create things and keep them, which sounds weird. So I don't create lots of different patterns and then go, oh, that's amazing, I'm going to use that again in 3 years' time or something. I just delete everything. I kind of, as I showed you earlier, I just load in an init. I've got rid of all those sounds. I've just created get rid of that arpeggiator. So I tend to start everything from beginning, and I suppose that's how, from my perspective, I've built up the speed as well. So every time starting from scratch, if I just want to quickly sound design a sound, it literally is quick, rather than load. Sometimes it's quicker for me to sound design something than load a preset if I'm after something. Obviously it's not as rich as a preset. If that makes sense, and that's a funny question. C, could be a bit of a garbled one from Bill. If that makes sense. So because I'm kind of starting from an initial point most of the time, just because that's the way I like to use this, I don't use presets and patterns as much as I should. Occasionally use a lead sound, but I just, you know, spend 20 seconds doing a quick sound design of something. If it, and then, you know, it will save itself on a pattern. Notice this is completely pattern free. These are just ones I set up during this session. I don't really save patterns, so I don't need to back up. I know that that sounds weird to some people, I suppose. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone, and hope it's been useful. There's probably quite a few little areas I didn't touch on, but yeah, it's a great machine, great workstation. Once you're familiar with the sequencing Elektron workflow, it can be pretty fast to come up with ideas. You know, literally 2 minutes and you're going. Maybe quicker than other instruments. I don't know. That'd be cool. And so yeah, if hopefully that gave you a bit of an insight if you're thinking about buying one, or you've got one and you're still struggling with bits here and there. But yeah, thanks for listening, and see you next week. Might be back on the modular, or if this has been useful, tell me in the comments, because I can always do more individual bits of gear lives and Q&As, which is might be nice every now and then, rather than just jamming. I didn't really do a proper jam actually. I suppose it was interspersed in the talk, but you know, a bit of playing around. But thanks very much, and yeah, see you next week.